Okay, good evening, everyone. Have you ever been in a situation where you were promised one thing, you decided to take a step into faith, and then found yourself in a completely different reality? Never, right? Well, that was also me about 7 years ago. I was hired into a corporate executive role as a change agent, and only 3 weeks into my experience, I found my colleagues, my stakeholders, often exhausted and overly cynical. Where I gained energy from the possibility of transformation, I was taken back to sense the entitlement, the resistance, and a clear sense of unfulfillment. Work serves as a source of many for today's leaders. Economic gain, social status, a sense of identity. Even though there is considerable research regarding the impact of work on our lives, we as 21st century leaders tend to pay more attention to the utility drivers. That's primarily because our current work practices have been developed by industrialists. And modern economists, they tend to identify rational ends with utility maximization, resulting in welfare. Welfare, however, is not the same as well-being. When we over-focus on the rational, our cultures become habitats of irrationality. We delude our experiences by losing focus on the core purpose of our doing and look over a number of key factors that aid the formation of our being. In the past several hundred years, and most certainly in the recent decades, extraordinary developments have taken place in our global economies. We experienced a steady shift from manufacturing to information societies. We witnessed the transition of manual labor to creative mind works. Today, we wonder about the future, trying to juggle the dense impact of globalization, digitalization, and democratization in the workplace. It's no secret business hustles for adaptiveness, and organizations compete for agility. While at the same time, a significant portion of our workforce continues to struggle for their dignity and belonging. Now, many decision makers understand this tension. Depending on the maturity of their organization, they may even demonstrate a level of desire or commitment to enhancing capability. What's not commonly understood, however, is that the kind of developments we are observing in the global landscape today, they create not only new demands for advanced organizational interventions, they create new demands for our inner sources and more holistically too. There is a call to expand individual capacity. It requires us to develop better resilience, exercise more consciousness, and take accountability in the process of regeneration. This is not just asked at the top levels either, it's really asked at every levels of our enterprises. Unfortunately, though, majority of us remain a skeptic to this kind of transformation. Under our current definition of leadership, we tend to elevate those in positions of power and then turn to higher authority for driving change, at times sacrificing our most inner values. Interestingly, though, the etymology of leading has a slightly different meaning than the one we have adopted over the years. In its ancient terms, leadership is better related to be a guide, to be an educator or a reflector to a particular process or a flow. In this definition, there is a strong focus on interconnectedness, calling attention to the link between self and the other. There is a service aspect, serving something bigger than self, perhaps a mission or a community. There's also emphasis on individual power. Imagine hundreds of software engineers sitting across the world, not knowing each other, yet collaborating to create something we refer to as Internet today. In the past 2 years, together with Stanford University's Center for Compassion, Altruistic Research and Education, we examined the kind of questions that can reconnect us back to the original terms of leadership. We studied thousands of organizations and their leadership behaviors to understand what it may mean to be a leader in this increasingly complex, highly digitized, and challengingly interconnected world. Specifically, we look to understand which knowledge, mindsets, and behaviors are at play for driving sustainable change, and what sort of inside-out interventions are available to us to develop resilience and to support our growth. Drawing from several disciplines, including neuroscience, biology of well-being, positive psychology, organizational psychology, sociology, and even economics, though I dare to say, we examined the neural correlates, the biological basis, antecedents, and effects of a large variety of core human attributes. Now, this goes without saying, but there are a number of factors that go into making of positive climates. For the purposes of our study, we named 8 core attributes that are key for us to embrace as future leaders. Recognize these attributes are available to all of us, despite geography, levels of income, levels of education, or even experience. We are literally born into them, each one of us, as human beings. We learned through our study, majority of us have a stronger, more natural connection to them as children, and eventually we lose it. We also learned that self-esteem is a must, and self-awareness is key to their development, but when exercised consciously, they each support first the expansion of our individual capacities, and from there, motivate a number of positive outcomes that advance organizational capabilities. Let me give you a few examples. Today, majority of us sit and work in environments that look more like this. Now, we have been able to validate through our study that these are indeed the kind of environments that are lacking of the exercise of attributes mentioned. Okay? So specifically, in environments where leaders were reportedly not connected to a purpose, and employees were struggling to understand their mission, we found organizations had a more difficult time experiencing what we would refer to as inspiration and meaning formation. Instead, there was more lacking in the environment. Similarly, in environments where leaders were reportedly overbusy and employees struggled to find reflective time to exercise wonder, we found organizations had a harder time to experience creativity. In contrast, there was more cynicism in the climate. Now, the good news is we also found the opposite to be true. So in environments where leaders were reportedly connected to purpose and employees felt grounded in their mission, indeed, organizations were able to experience inspiration and meaning formation as a whole. To take a different example this time, in environments where leaders were reportedly connected to reality and employees felt they could tap their intuition in the process of decision-making, we found organizations had a better time experiencing agility as a whole. Now, as a peer leader and an IO psychologist, you would appreciate I worked with hundreds of executives over the years. For all the leaders I've been fortunate enough to serve, only a handful couldn't make progress. And you know what? 99% of the time, their circumstance didn't change immediately. They initiated self-design to create the kind of environments where they can actualize their true sense of leadership, and from there, shared with others ultimately the benefit of their growth. The Industrial Revolution 4.0 is rightly characterized as the age of amazement. Throughout the history, we never had the unpredictability of economics, nor the pace of change as we experience today. It's becoming inarguable that our current governing structures are not prepared to bridge the environmental, the economic, the social aspects of our humanities, nor are our world leaders equipped to role model the way. Business has a unique opportunity here to become the model of sustainable change. We can, and I firmly believe this, we can reinvent capitalism by serving and complementing our humanities. And more excitingly, we, as the leaders of well-developed communities like Nordics, can step up and role model transcendence. So I'm inviting you to imagine beauty in business with me. This imagination in my heart and in my mind holds a feeling of care, curing, connecting, cultivating our humanities. And it also beholds a way of human leadership that's grounded on compassionate and unbiased love. One Nobel Prize winner at the World Economic Forum this year said, "GDP is not a good measure of economic performance, and it's also not a good measure of well-being." Evolutionary cultural transformation is possible, and it's heavily influenced by design. Where there is true intent, the paradigm slowly starts to shift, but never without a genuine participation of its stakeholders. As the leaders of this new era, we do have a choice to our reality every day. When we do, our action becomes contagious, and when awakened, our most human qualities support us in developing a generous incarnation and building of trust-based environments we all long to be a part of. The key, of course, remains in our intent. Thank you for listening.